Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 1991 film Child's Play 3, and yes, still working my way through this 7-film collection. The first two were a good time. This is the first speed bump that I've kind of hit in the franchise where I'm like, yeah, that one didn't taste too great. And it tastes even worse because the first two were pretty good. And coming off of that wonderful ending of Child's Play 2 with the Chucky explosion, didn't get anything all that great in comparison in this film, but let's get into it. Child's Play 3, 1991, directed by Jack Bender, who did lots of TV shows and TV movies, including Alias, shows, not movies. Alias, Carnival, which is a wonderful show that very underrated that was on HBO. The Sopranos, Lost, Game of Thrones, and more recently, Mr. Mercedes. So, pretty good pedigree. Written, obviously, by Don Mancini, who also did Cellar Dweller, Child's Play 2, Bride of Chucky, Seed of Chucky, Curse of Chucky, Cult of Chucky, some episodes of Hannibal, and Channel Zero. This film was apparently ordered by Universal before the second one even came out. Mancini was actually rushed, and he said that he was out of ideas for a script, so he cites this as being his least favorite in the franchise. That's easy to see why. And when you know that backstory, it really does feel relatively uninspired, especially in comparison to the first two films. It really, especially the characters. One of my biggest issues with this film in general is the characters are so weak, and they're extremely underdeveloped. They don't really develop barely anyone. It's pretty much just, here's Chucky, here's Andy, and you have a built-in affection for Andy because of, knowing Andy from the first two films, so you've been with him through a lot, and everyone else just seems to just be there, pretty much, to be basically cannon fodder. They do kind of try to, endear you to a few characters, but for me, it just didn't really happen, because all the characters, like I said, are so weak. They weren't that well acted, that's another thing, and they just weren't very well developed, so those are my biggest issues with the film, but you can definitely tell this was a rush job. The film only made about $6.5 million, so that's why another installment in the franchise after this wasn't done until 7 years later, which I will be reviewing next, which is Bride of Chucky, which I'm excited for because I've never seen it before, and I've heard it's quite good. Budget constraints kept Mancini from putting multiple Chuckies in this film. He really wanted to have multiple Chuckies in this film. Now, that concept will show up later in the franchise. He finally got to use it at that point, but he wanted to try and do it at this point. Makes me wonder what that would have been like for a third Child's Play film, but we didn't get that. Peter Jackson was actually rumored to have been asked to direct this film. Another situation where you wonder what that would have been like, but, the script still wasn't great, so I'm kind of glad that Peter Jackson's name wasn't sullied with this one. And maybe that's why he didn't end up directing it, is because he read the script and was like, I'm good. This is the only film where Andy isn't played by Alex Vincent. Yeah, that's the other thing. It's weird to change actors, and obviously they had to do it because they have a large time leap, and Alex Vincent didn't look the part for the time leap that they were having done, so that's why it's not actually Alex Vincent. That said, it still kind of is weird for people who are fans of the franchise who have watched the first two films. They're like, this is clearly a different person. It's just kind of odd to try and get used to that. Plus, I don't think they did that great of a job. I think the original Andy was much better. All right, even though the warehouse in the beginning of this has been abandoned for a long time, somehow there's still blood in Chucky's corpse. That is the first of many little miniature plot holes within this film that I will point out, all of that occurred to me while I was watching the film. But the first one's like, okay, it's been abandoned long enough that there are just cobwebs covering everything and dust. Yet there's still actually blood that hasn't evaporated inside the corpse of Chucky. Interesting start to the film. I did like that. And then, the blood dripping into the vat of the of all the liquid plastic. That was cool. I do like the intro of it. The reverse melting of Chucky being put back together during the opening credits is extremely cool and creepy. It actually reminded me of the fact that that's how the Frank body reconstruction scene was done in Hellraiser, which is a fun thing to bring up too, because Andrew Robinson is in this film as Sergeant Botnick, the guy who does the hair cutting, and he played Larry in the original Hellraiser. So it was funny that I thought about that, and then a little bit later in the film, Andrew Robinson pops up, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Which he did a good job. Like, he's always good. So he was good, but a lot of other people were not. Corporate greed in motion at the beginning of this film as the higher-ups in the Play Pals company angle for making good guy dolls yet again because they made good money. Obviously, there's a jab at corporate greed in this, which is something that's shown up in films a lot of the time, but hey, that's something that never goes away, is it? So it makes sense to just keep bringing it up. Sullivan, the head of Play Pals, says that people don't even remember Andy and don't care, which actually at this point is probably sadly true. As we all know nowadays, people's attention span is about that of a goldfish when it comes to current events and what's going on in the news. So, yeah, I believe it when he says that, especially now in 2022. I totally believe that it's been some years and he's just like, no one remembers Andy, no one remembers the issue with the good guy doll. We're good. We can start making these again, and cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. I was like, yeah, makes sense. Solid reveals slowly moving the camera to show that Chucky is not in the box when his box had been taken to Sullivan's, I guess that was his office? That was a really nice office. I want an office like that. How do you get that? I guess you got to be like the CEO of a company. Not going to happen for me. But the box is sitting on the couch, and then they do like this slow moving of the camera, and it moves around, and then you see that he's not in it. That's a cool reveal. And there was some really good camera movement in this film. You can tell that Jack Bender really is a good director because it looked good. It's just the problem where the material wasn't that great. The script wasn't great. And obviously, it's because it was rushed. So I don't really blame Mancini for this one too much. Like the other films, they do a good job of drawing out certain scenes before a death, because I think that really does help in building up tension. Obviously, they did that in the first death of Sullivan, and I think that's really good, because it's like dark, and there's a lot of clutter in his office that, Chucky could be kind of anywhere at any moment. And the longer they prolong it, he's going to get it. It's just, you're just waiting with anticipation because you feel like it could be at any moment. So those are the great moments of these types of movies, and they did a lot of that in the first and second film, and they do it again here in the beginning. Then they kind of get away from it a little bit more as the film goes on, unfortunately. Just like in the strangling scene in the previous film, the scary part of it is Chucky's expressions as well as his maniacal yelling. That's another thing. He's not laughing during the strangulation in this one. In Child's Play 2, he was laughing, and that was terrifying. In this one, it's just like the yelling mixed with the expressions that is terrifying. Because otherwise, it's not a great death. But again, Brad Dourif and the work of the puppeteers with the Chucky doll sell it. Colonel Cochran tells Andy what all other adults have throughout all the films. Grow up. It's kind of a reoccurring theme where no one will believe Andy, no one wants to believe Andy, and their solution for him is grow up. It's imaginary. This isn't something that actually happened. So at this point, when you're hearing it again, you're kind of rolling your eyes along with Andy to kind of be like, oh my gosh, no one believes him. No one will take pity on this situation. The introduction of the character of Whitehurst shows him as an outcast, but like Andy. So they do the same with Tyler as well. And to a degree, De Silva. This just kind of lets you know that they're all going to come together. Like, they're going to be a group. They're all going to like each other. Because samesies, we're all outcasts in one way or another. And we're not jerks like Shelton. So, yeah. They go pretty over the top to make you dislike Shelton, by the way. The scene where they introduce him and he's kind of like yelling at everyone and just being a general jerk, I feel like it just goes on too long. And there are quite a few scenes that go on, not like super, super long, but they go on too long. They definitely feel like they overstay their welcome. And that one, the introduction of Shelton, is probably the prime one that I would say needed cut back. Because him just yelling at Andy is all you need to know about him being a jerk. Because we're already all in on supporting Andy. Because we've been through the first two films. So yeah. De Silva helps Andy with shooting, and that kind of means that she must be at least somewhat a love interest, because this was the 90s, and that's what we were doing in film at that point. Even before that, even after that, it was just a thing. That's one of the things I'm glad we've gotten away from a lot in film, is just feeling like characters need relationships in film. I feel like a lot of times it just ends up taking away from the actual story that we could be enjoying instead. Sometimes it's important, but a lot of times it's not. The dump truck death scene is okay-ish. I like the aspect of his getting like his arm out and like it looks like the arm gets crushed. That's cool, but other than that, it's not that great. That's why I said okay-ish. Not a lot of great deaths in this, to be honest. The camera focuses very hard on the knife that Andy has early on, which means it's going to end up being an important knife. Yeah, he ends up getting cut with it. Knives were, used a decent amount in this film. Chucky was really going after knives in this one until the very end when he actually had a gun. With him, though, it's whatever he can get his little grubby mitts on. So why doesn't Chucky just go after Tyler instead of taking the detour to try and take out Andy? Another plot hole. If he's focused, like he's saying he is, on getting into a body, and he's figured out he can use Tyler, or at least he believes he can, and the start of, the storm coming in and everything while he's doing the ritual reciting, that would indicate that it would work. Why doesn't he just take care of it? It's like he has this need to go and deal with Andy first, and it doesn't make sense. Wouldn't he just take care of the ritual with Tyler? Hopefully Andy doesn't even know he's there at that point because he doesn't even need him. And then he can take care of Andy after the fact, after he's inhabited Tyler's body. Or just not, and then he can get out of there at some point and do whatever he wants. It just didn't make sense. When Chucky pops up behind Andy in Shelton's room, he could have just taken him out at that point. So he's so focused on trying to take out Andy, he gets the prime opportunity because he sneaks up behind Andy when he's in Shelton's room. But instead, he says something to him. He says his name and taunts him and then ends up running away. He literally could have just stabbed him or slit his throat at that point. Again, plot hole. I don't understand it. We've already established the script's not great. Cochran's death is awful. The worst death in this film. And it's also idiotic that Shelton says it doesn't make sense that he died because he served 2 tours in Nam. Shelton, have you heard of the fact that people just have heart attacks? It does happen. Also, it didn't look like Cochran was in great shape. He may not have been eating well. He may be a smoker. All these factors that add up to having a higher increased chance of having a heart attack. By the way, Sergeant Bodnick is Andrew Robinson, who played Larry in Hellraiser. I already talked about that. While it's still not great, Botnick's throat-slitting death is probably the best one in the film, other than Chucky's. I'm not counting Chucky's. Other than Chucky's, which still isn't even that great, but Botnick getting his throat slit, because you see the where the razor hit, and you actually see some blood coming out, and his acting's good. Andrew Robinson knows how to die on screen, that's for sure. So it's the best death in this film. That's not saying a lot, though, unfortunately. And why wouldn't Whitehurst tell anyone that he saw Botnick dead? It seemed like the driving factor in that was that he didn't want to tell people that he saw Chucky, but you don't need to. You can just say, someone killed him, I saw him dead. But he chooses to tell nobody. For a long time, he tells absolutely nobody. Actually, I don't think he ever even said it at all. And that doesn't make sense, especially for the character that he is, because he paints you as the type of person who's on the up and up and is downtrodden but will do the right thing and say the right thing. Another plot hole. It just did not make sense. A lot of these moments where it's like, let's ignore what would actually happen here just to move this along. Which, I get it. If Mancini was just trying to bang the script out, which it sounds like was the case, I get it. I do like the extra bit of danger that Chucky introduces by switching the paint bullets to real ones in the war games. I like that aspect of it. Now, when we get to the actual war games, it takes too long. The actual focus on stuff going on with the war games when Chucky's not involved in it directly, Not great. But the scene where, the red team and the blue team come together and the red team's actually shooting at them and actually kills Shelton, well, I'm assuming kills him, that was kind of cool. That was relatively well done. This Tyler kid gets annoying pretty fast with how clueless and helpless he is. Just another thing pointing at how weak these characters are. And Tyler in particular, just a very weak kind of roll your eyes at him type character, to be honest. Yeah, he just got kind of like whiny and he's just so helpless. You're just like, okay, let's just dispatch of this character real quick. Didn't happen, unfortunately. You'd think the red team would pretty quickly figure out that they were shooting live rounds. That's one thing, another little plot hole here, because they knew what it looked like when they were supposed to be shooting the paint bullets, correct? Yes. So the fact that they are also hearing the ricochets of the gunshots and also seeing that they actually shot Shelton, like, I don't know. It didn't register fast enough for what it would have been, in my opinion. But small thing. You're supposed to care that Whitehurst ends up throwing himself on the grenade for everyone, but his character is just so weak and so underdeveloped that I could have cared less. Just another character that I was just like, okay, bye. Like, he wasn't really endeared to the audience all that much. No character was, really. And, they didn't even further your endearment with Andy either. Like, it's just a very shallow story for the most part. Of course there's a carnival nearby. The carnival just like randomly shows up at the end of this film, but it's actually the best looking part of the film in my opinion. It actually just made me start to wonder, what if the entire film was just like Chucky loose at a carnival? I feel like that would have been better. At the least, it would have looked more cool because they put a lot into the design of this like haunted ride that they were doing. It was cool. Like, I like that aspect of it. Like, I felt like it kind of picked up in a much better way at the end of the film, but it was also, too little, too late type thing. I do like the practical effects when Chucky gets part of his face cut off. Like, it looks really gnarly. You can see these turning back into a human type creature. Because it's all bloody and it's nasty viscera under there. That's cool. Looked great. After Andy shoots Chucky, he's not dead because, hey, if you've seen any of these films, he's never dead the first time. So you just, at this point, expect, okay, he's coming back. Now, the fact that he didn't come back another time after that, I was surprised about. And then his death in the giant fan, okay. I mean, the fact that you see, like, some blood fly and you see, like, all his parts come apart in this gigantic, very scary-looking fan. Not bad, but in comparison to the end of Child's Play 2, not great. Basically, anything having to do with happening at the military school in this film that does not have Chucky directly in it is boring. Yeah. The best part of the film is anything having to do with Chucky, his foul mouth, Brad Dourif's acting. Everything else, pretty drab, pretty boring for the most part. And the last thing I'll leave you with, if you want to watch this film on a deeper level, not saying it was intended, this is pretty much Andy versus toxic masculinity, if you want to watch it that way. Now, do I think that amount of thought was put into the script? Probably not. But if you really step back, you can interpret it that way. It's literally Andy battling and fending off toxic masculinity the whole time. I mean, especially back in the 90s, the epitome of toxic masculinity is this military structure that he's at, or that he's in at this military school. So if you want to watch it that way, if you want to interpret that way, maybe it makes it a little bit better. Maybe it makes it a little more intellectual and deeper, but I think I'm giving it too much credit there. Just saying. So out of 5 stars with half stars in play, between 1.5 and 2 stars, but I'm going to go 1.5 just because there's not enough good stuff in there for me to really enjoy it that much. But no, on a different day, I could have gone 2 stars. But I'm going to say 1.5 stars. Obviously, the worst of the first 3 films. I'm sure everyone saw that coming. But let me know your thoughts on this. Go ahead and put it in the comments. And especially if you like it. I really want to know, what do you like about this film? Because maybe you can sway me a little bit. Change my mind slightly. Do me a favor, hit subscribe to my channel. If you haven't already, I would greatly appreciate that. And hit the notification bell button, because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos. But yeah, thank you so much for taking your time to watch this video, and until next time, keep it brutal.